by sending them to the vocational training board or the schools that they've been to where they've been taught a trade. It will give us an opportunity to give them hope, that there's something to look forward to, and to be able to stand back and see their handiwork every single day and know that I repaired that, I fixed that, I was a workman on that, to have a sense of pride in their community. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for me as a parliamentary representative working in my constituency, one of the things I want to see happen is transformation. And transformation can be a slow process, but transformation will not come by words. It will not come through talk. It will not come through wishing and hoping. It is really when you have opportunities like this for the repair of wells, electricals, doors, and so on, that a government can take the opportunity of this work to do a number of things. One, they can do remedial training with persons who maybe have had the skills but they haven't done it for a long time, or maybe there are new methods that have emerged. It's a wonderful opportunity to retrain them in new techniques, new standards, and use those within the rebuilding and refurbishing of the housing units. It is also an opportunity to do something else. One of the things that needs to return to Barbados is the spirit of volunteerism. And Prime Minister has spoken about this repeatedly, that we have to come back to a place where the community understands it has a responsibility to itself to come together and do things for each other, with each other, to help to uplift our nation. And that is why she had identified in education that there would be a give back program with the university students who get their free education, that they should be able to give back into the community. As an MP, I want to restore that at the community level. That if we can have a situation, that's why I'm so looking forward to the changes with the electrical program and so on, that if we can have a program where the people in the area with the skills get that work, and then because they've had the opportunity to get that work, that they too can commit community hours. That if each of them made a commitment of 10 community hours, that we could use those community hours to do things for the residents in the community. Barbados is an aging society, and many of those units have elderly people in them. People who are no longer able to lift, hammer, move, dig, paint, things that they took for granted when they were in the height of their youth. Now that they're older, it is so much more difficult for them to do. I remember how when people needed to go to get some water, some of the elderly did not have anyone to get it for them, and they could manage it themselves. It would have taken the community to sort that out. And so what I want to do is to have a program where when people are able to get work from government, they can then commit time to their communities and start that spirit of volunteerism. What I'm hoping is that it would so inspire them and feel so good doing something for their neighbor, a neighbor that they've grown up around, that that neighbor could call on them on another occasion, not because they're giving back hours because we ask it of them, but because they recognize, you know something, I could always go and do that for Miss Slater. The third thing that I would like to see come out of the electrical and the wells and repair program for the housing units would be, you have the work, you have the volunteerism, but I would want to mobilize the constituency around a common objective, that they start to purchase goods and services from each other in that community, so that as they earn money, they are able to take that money and spend it with their neighbor. Maybe the neighbor offers a service. Maybe they sell food. Maybe they do vegetables. Maybe they're a handy person, and they can use their skills to do work in the community. And I believe that if we can take the opportunities provided by these repair programs and use it to focus the community on a specific set of values, that we will start to rebuild good working communities, that we will be able to help people live a satisfying life, and that people can have a hope for their dreams. One of the issues that must accompany any housing program that we would want to pursue, and Prime Minister is very conscious of this. She preaches it to us every time we meet. The absolute need for economic growth. Because even if we were to find funding to provide housing, unless people have money to pay for it, then that housing program can go nowhere. Therefore, hand in hand must come the housing program with economic growth. So what is happening at the moment is that we are working assiduously on identifying opportunities for that economic growth, because that growth will bring the job opportunities that we need. No doubt everyone heard the honourable member for St. Michael South Central when she shared on television about the plan for the whole redevelopment of Bridgetown. Plenty of opportunities for jobs there. Everybody is aware of the program put on by the honourable member for St. Philip South, where he has launched the FEED program, where people can get involved in agriculture. The government is also pursuing at this time other opportunities to enfranchise workers to be a part of whatever growth and development is happening in Barbados. And one of the things that we are doing in our ministry is looking out for the potential new trade opportunities, identifying countries that have potential for trade and business, and to be able to build the necessary foreign affairs relationships with them and begin to lay the foundation for us to engage in trade. All of this will start to bring the economic growth, and that growth will result in jobs, and those jobs will allow people to have the opportunity to be able to afford homes. So these are some of the things that we need to do. In any housing program, because as I've spoken with people, they've sat in front of me, they've shared their particular difficulties, and indeed there are certain common threads that run through their challenges. One, many people, they don't have high-paying jobs. Because of the economic circumstances they find themselves in, their savings have been depleted. And so being able to find that deposit is a challenge. For many people, being able to pay more than $600 or $800 is also a challenge per month. So many ask me, how would they be able to afford it? If they cannot get a government unit where they can pay $55 a week, how are they going to be able to afford housing in the private sector? And this is where we have to sit with our constituents and begin to develop programs as to how we're going to help them to go forward. In my discussions with my constituents, I often share with them that there may be a number of things that we have to do. One, a person may need to expand their income. And this is where people buying from each other is important. I ask them, is there a skill that you have? Are there resources at your disposal that you could convert into income-generating activities? Can you bake something? Can you do something? Is there anything extra you feel you can do that your community needs that you'll be able to sell to that community? And can you then begin a positive saving program that you can begin to put that money aside towards getting your own home? One of the things I feel needs to be put into any government program in relation to housing and to making it affordable. Many years back, we used to have the 100% mortgages program, And that used to be very, very helpful to people who did not have the 10% deposit to put down on a home. But it made it possible for them to be part of the home owning group. Then the other program was the rent-to-own programs. Those two are very, very useful to people to be able to get that opportunity to be able to start their own home. One of the things that we need to emphasize among people is the use of cooperatives. Now, cooperatives in Barbados, we have some, and some are very strong. But there are cooperatives in other parts of the world that go beyond the savings program. I know that some of our cooperatives here have started little housing programs. They do help with mortgages and so on. But overseas, you find that they would have a housing cooperative, or they would have some type of business cooperative, a cooperative dedicated to some particular activity that was critical to its members. And certainly in the area of housing, we could form a housing cooperative that can begin to pool monies together, pool synergies together, and be able to negotiate for a program. We can do self-help programs. Barbadians are so accustomed to this. Others have mentioned it, that if they're able to get the land, they will work and work until they build little by little, working on weekends. Some people build their own homes because they may be very handy. They may have a brother or sister who will be able to help them. I remember one of my constituents in West Terrace. I pass once a week and I would see the progress that he was making. It took him some time. It took him more than a year, but he was able to eventually complete his home because he did some self-help. And I think that we can begin to encourage people to do this. Another thing that I've been seeking to encourage my constituents to do, quite a few of them, a lot of people feel that people who live in the urban corridor are not interested in agriculture, but let me tell you, I have a team that wants to do agriculture badly. They want to do agriculture. So I'm going to be having some discussions with the Honourable Member for St. Philip South about getting my people into agriculture. Now, what some people don't realize is that Barbados is not self-sufficient in poultry, although we do a lot of it. And therefore, there's a lot of room to grow poultry that you can earn money. And that's how old people used to build their homes. They would raise pigs. They would raise chickens. They would put that money aside. And that money would bank up, bank up, bank up, bank up. And as fast as they would say, catch their hand, they would call in the mason, call in the carpenter, buy a few supplies, get part of it done, and little by little, they would do it. And sometimes I've heard of families where people built 2 and 3 homes using that method and not having a mortgage. And these would be ordinary, everyday citizens in ordinary jobs that may not be paying a lot, but they find creative ways to find that money and to be able to come up with a plan. The last thing I usually say to my constituents when we are trying to discuss alternatives for housing, I keep trying to point out that good relationships are important for housing. That when you live together in a home, if people do not build positive and good relations, and tensions break out, and those stresses get out of hand, this is where somebody has to ask somebody to leave, or the police have to come and put somebody out, or someone is so miserable, so unhappy in the circumstances, they're forced to leave and put up with whatever conditions they find outside of their home because they just find the conditions within the house intolerable. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, good relationships are critical for success in life. Whether it's getting a job, keeping a job, getting a home, keeping a home, getting a family, keeping a family together. You need it for success. And one of the things I try to point out to people is that when we are going to live in community together, there will be certain rules that have to obtain. In other words, we cannot do as we like in a home that is overcrowded. You can't be selfish. You cannot be inconsiderate in the use of the resources. You have to be thoughtful of others. You have to respect other people's property. And very often, sometimes when you listen to the stories of why some people end up being evicted from their family home, sometimes it is because the relationships have become very, very strained. So one of the things that I want to encourage us to do, I think if Barbadians are going to have a successful future, we have to be able to do things together. And we have to be able to pool resources to improve our circumstances. One of the conditions that I've found sometimes with some families, the parents may own the home. It might be an elderly pensioner. There may be several adult children in the home, living in the home, but nobody wants to repair anything. Nobody wants to take their money and put in the house because they say the house is not theirs. But my position is, but you live there. This is where you live. And therefore you need to contribute to the maintenance of that home. So I believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that if we could help Barbadians to change their thinking, if we can get them to change their social relations, they could better weather the storm and better weather their housing crisis if they can at least build good relations and pool monies together to take the family forward. And I would want to commend this to them. And to the Honourable Member from the Ministry of Housing, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, and the Honourable Member for St. John, I would want to say to them how I'm looking forward to the electrical program. I'm very pleased to hear that it will be on the road shortly. And I look forward to walking with the Honourable Member from St. Andrew into the constituency to make that announcement to the good people of Haynesville that they can look forward to their electricals, they can look forward to wells being repaired, and they can look forward to the transfer of the houses into their name as soon as they are able to sort out all the legal requirements. So I want to thank him in advance, and I look forward to connecting to him on this matter shortly. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
You're welcome. Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I know that the genesis of this debate starts with a resolution related to the acquisition of land in St. Lucie, the vesting of land to the government in St. Lucie, private property going to the state for the purpose of housing. But it also coincides with a very sensitive, and probably it's better to say emotional, subject that is not even a subtopic, so to speak, in the circumstances that there's a young man who, unfortunately, he lost his life because of neglect by the state. And neglect don't necessarily mean that it occurred yesterday or the day before, but neglect of the state where any balanced and serious individual would know that the conditions existed even before our time. I don't want to carry the debate down that line because sometimes it is difficult to fully explain it to anybody who is a malcontent or anybody who chooses to misrepresent what you say, as long as you say something, even if you don't even touch on the subject matter. So I feel that it is still important that the government of the day demonstrate to the people of Barbados, and more in particular to the people of the Pine, how much we share the sorrow of the parents, relatives, the entire community of the Plain how much this matter, in a very sensitive way, touch on the conscience of all of us as parliamentarians, especially persons who were born in similar circumstances, and those who had the privilege. It's a privilege because you become more humane to socialize in the environments like the people in the Pine, like the people in Licorice Village, where the honorable member for St. Michael South indicated that he was socialized in those kinds of environment, from poverty to poverty, as though it is going to be persistent poverty. And what we are struggling with today is how can we find that ethical neutrality that allows us to balance economic development and also social development. How do we find that balance? And we have to be always conscious that we have a responsibility. All of us ought to. I can't say all of us do, but all of us ought to, because we'll be betraying the trust that these poor people vested in us. All of us came here not as a result, especially if the numerical strength is the calculation that is normally used in order to determine who return here to Parliament. We come to Parliament as parliamentary representatives to represent the interests mainly of the majority, because the majority, it so happens that the majority in almost every society are the people on the rims of that society who are experiencing all of these social hardships out of a political system that is a liberal political system, only concentrating in the private sector on profit, inserting provisions in their philosophy that there's corporate responsibility and that there's a social conscience. But there are some of us also that are shaped by that philosophy. And we can't believe that we are making progress unless we have capital development and not necessarily human capital development. And the history is very clear. For those who abandoned the human capital development over the years, we saw nothing but suffering in all different forms. And I keep saying almost monotonously that these governments, with these physiologs, with these kind of pigmentations or shades, but all with a commonality of pigmentation, have a duty to do all that we can to make sure things like this don't continue to occur and cause harm to poor people. The honorable member for St. Michael South indicate Licorice Village, a community to which I represent, and a community, as he indicated, he was in those early days of his life, up to the point when he was still an adolescent, he was still molded by all the social practices, the economic forms of deprivation that existed inside those communities. We know what it is. Somebody's a fall in a pit. How long things like this would continue. Certainly not in perpetuity. There are still people in our communities who are landless people as well, and who are also homeless, and some living in shelters that you certainly cannot qualify them as homes, with no pits or no wells at all. I know a resident in my community who have to squat and defecate over a hole. And from time to time, you have to hold the children's hands so they will not fall into these pits. So I want us to begin to apply ourselves to what is. It is fundamental that we understand what is in this society. That poor people must be at the center of development for any government that has a social conscience. And just like you love the Lord's Prayer, just like you love going to church on Sunday and praising the Lord, you have a commitment to yourself to do all that you can to eradicate all of these social and economic ills that impact our poor people. If this government is off track, then it has to get back on track. Because one of the things that I remember clearly before 2008 is that the then Prime Minister never stopped saying, I am here to stop poor people from being poor. Poverty and landlessness, poverty and homelessness, poverty and ignorance, poverty and ill health. And a conscious effort was made. It might not be a balance that gives us equality, but it was a journey towards arriving at equality. And that really constitutes the philosophy that must continue in a modern form of governance in a colony which has been stripped of all that it has and now got to go begging arms for assistance in order to allow all people to enjoy a good quality of life. It is because others that were here never respect any form of philosophy to guide them. They have never had any clear objectives. They tried functioning on arithmetic and could not get it done. The philosophy itself must always say this trajectory is that we are on our journey so that our people tomorrow can enjoy a better quality of life than they enjoyed when they became at first captives and were enslaved. But that is our mission. That is the mission that the forefathers gave us. That is the mission that the forefathers sacrificed their lives even in circumstances when they know they could not win. But that's what Buster did. And you hear me say these things from time to time. That's what he did. He's not a foolish man. He went in a battle knowing that the people had supreme weaponry. He knew what was in the harbor. He knew the militia was around. But he said things must change. I might not come out alive, but I'm going to break the back of the hegemonic practices of the time. And that's what he did. He broke the back. We broke the back again in the 30s. And these are historic junctures that we must reflect on at times like these. It is not because the honorable member for Southeast was negligent. It is not because she is not Mary. That like any other human being, she is vulnerable and had challenges and cannot be around at this specific time? Because even if she was around, with the state rate of all its resources over the last 10 years, with all the demands on the state, like any ordinary human being, if you're broke, you're broke. You would like to do things for your children. You would like to do things for yourself. You would like to improve the shingles on top of the roof. You would like to take off the asbestos on top of the houses. You would like to dig a pit. You would like to have waterborne facilities, but you're broke. We inherit a rape treasury. This is not 2008, when the then Prime Minister underneath the Barbados Labour Party was talking to us about how many $1 billion we had in foreign reserves. This is not a time in 2008 when we were here talking about 6.5% unemployment and we were discussing something called, how much it was? $18 billion in what? Man, you sound like you're talking about money from out of India. Huh? We had so much money. We had so $1.8 billion, close to $2 billion. That's all like rupees and that kind of dollars. Huh? That's the kind of result for reserves.
2.8.
We had that kind of money.
2.8 billion. 2.8.
2.8 billion. You see, I underestimating it still sound mammoth. If it is that size, 2.8 billion, ask these people what they left here. Now we are faced with the challenges of the representative of Haynesville, another housing community, who happened to be the person who saved Barbados from Al Capone. Al Capone, right? We are here studying how can we do all that we can with no funds and very limited funds to see how we can stop the units belonging to the government from burning in places like Haynesville, and obviously the Pine and the Ivy and Deacons, Fernyhurst, the Farm, all over Grisette. These are housing developments with people living in rooms extremely small with some massive families living in there. People sleeping in bunk beds. So when we feel passionate about these things, there are other people who disconnect. Because this is values versus facts now. The reality is, this is what we know, what we experience. But there are other people who derive their thoughts from values. They've got a view. When they see you, if you enter into a conversation to them about your house, and they come at you, and they see you with something like 4 by 6, and the kitchen, and the toilet, if you don't even know these names, dining room and drawing room and things, you know how long it takes me before I found the difference between dining room and the drawing room? These people got patios and all kinds of strange things. These people cannot understand why poor people experience these challenges because they don't see a challenge. They live in total isolation of the realities in the housing districts. They already stigmatized the housing districts. That is why I don't use certain words when it comes to my old people, because I know the psychological harm that has been done deliberately by those people who believe that they're linguists and they know language better than anybody else. They call us all kinds of things. I told you all that already. Squatters, imbeciles, every kind of negative thing that we hear. I know how these people feel. I know. This is no theatrics, I know. I have seen people talk real pretty and treat poor people bad. But they know the jargon well, so when they begin to talk about the challenges that poor people face and things, oh, But these people never eat a cheese cutter yet. Never. They don't care about anybody in here. Even though you're an MP and a minister, you cannot enjoy the privileges in this society like some people who only peek through the school doors of Barbados. Some of them went to Queens and Harrison were there for 2 weeks. And then came out and become managers. So you can't ask corporate Barbados. I'm not a dreamer who got interest not only at the parochial level, but outside of Barbados and got to repatriate funds back to the 62 children and grandchildren out there. We got to do what we are supposed to do. And we have been doing it from the birth of the institution. And this party at no time cannot go off track. I'm not going to, the reality is clear. You see all that happened prior to the last election. I don't have to put judgment on that. The people are not backward. People do not do it because they love me. People do it because they knew that they were suffering and dying because of the maladministration of that party. And the consequence of that is because worn down, the consequence of that is blame. And the fact that a member of parliament for the first time in the history of Barbados up there trying to push up a defense saying, always do it down here. That's where we are. And because others are not standing in the dock, he is not the only one. He is not the only one. And the people judge that, and they put us here. This is not a cosmetic exercise. This is not a ceremony for flaunting personalities. People expect us to be able to address these issues. We have to come straight and tell the people, look, we were broke and we are still broke and we are still coming out of this. But as soon, and we're going to, and you see where we are now, because historic social and economic conditions shape the ideas that I have. And it should shape the ideas. And you don't just go on high, even if it's an economic theory or social theory that you like, the present social and economic conditions must shape what we do. And if we have a priority, of today that need to be addressed today or even yesterday, it ought to be addressed yesterday, we have to do all that we have to make sure we address it. All of the wells across Barbados, don't care how difficult it is. So it's not only about fixing wells in the Pine, you know. It's about fixing wells wherever poor people live. The other people can fix wells for themselves. Nothing to do with being contemptuous. They can fix wells for themselves. So there are communities that we're telling people, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and the people don't have boots. You telling people, build houses. I hear a comment today too, that you try to tell people to do things. They cannot do it. There's unemployment and there's underemployment. There's high cost of living. These are challenges. We got to be martyred men in the circumstances and rescue the people. And if we have to shift the investments, the capital investments, let people be the center focus of the program. There are many things that we never saw before, but what we knew is that we felt some sense of happiness and we were still living at a high quality of life. Therefore, we were able to tell the world we now have men living to 76 and years old our average. We can say that in the 1930s. We can say it. So we made progress over the years. We can't now allow the circumstances to be retarded or retreated in any way. So we have to rescue it. If it means that, I know in our manifesto we say there's a mission critical program, this has to go into mission critical. This effort has to go into mission critical. We did not have the issue staring us in our face. It is now a glaring one. And it now puts an MP who going through all the challenges of life and people who made up of stone and concrete conscience talking nonsense before the brain getting into gear. She has to. I know it because I went through it. You have to. If you're sick, you're sick. When you begin to feel better, you will do your work. And we have to be here for her and the people of Southeast. If she is not here, then every MP across this country must adopt St. Michael's Southeast as their constituency and try to help. I want to assure the people in the Pine. I've spent some time in the Pine. I was I don't know what kind of resident you would describe me as, but I am not a passing through. I know about sleeping in the Ivy housing area. I know about sleeping in the Pine housing area as well. And I slept with my family on all the occasions. Sir?
This is not confession time.
Sir, the reality is...
You don't have to confess.
The reality is, I have a small housing area in St. Barnabas. I have a small housing area, but the Ivy is a little bigger, but certainly not as big as the Pine, Ferniehurst, or the Farm, or Deacons, and those areas, Silver Hill, and those areas. But we would be missing an important opportunity that open up a space for the unworthy to be able to capitalize and abuse the moment by trying to make it look as though this is a heartless government. This is a man it's like a man owned the house for 100 years. And somebody passed with a car and the house collapsed. All of a sudden you're blaming. Only if you have a brain that don't have any powers of analysis, you will conclude that the man with the car passed and that's why the house collapsed. The house is old for 100 years. These people left slabs broken. These people shift the responsibility which they had in order to win an election to the people, to the poor people. Tell them that you can own these houses. And everybody felt good because they wanted to own a house, a piece of the land. Everybody wanted peace. But then they had no more responsibility to maintain anything. So you had one house, you had 6 and 7 units to one community well. They never could get the matter solved. They can never give the people the deeds, the title deeds. So people live every day in limbo with something called letters of intent. They can't sell it, they can't mortgage it, they can't insure it, because they have nothing legal to show that the units belong to them. Therefore, the NAC shifting from the socialist agenda to what is called neoliberalism, but that is so much a pleasant word for such behavior, that kind of cruelty, that people was left with overflowing toilets, wells with broken concrete slabs, electrical installations burning or running people out of the houses, Plumbing bad, you had to then take up the responsibility in the middle of unemployment, in the middle of underemployment, now to provide all these services for yourself. There must be an opportunity cost. But you really end up with equivalent to nothing if you can't maintain the unit and if you don't even own it. And then the NHC had no money to go in and do anything. And then they construct houses, allow contractors to inflate the cost of the houses, and then whoever's the mathematicians end up charging people for units. That certainly could not be for low-income people. So you end up with Valerie, you end up with the Grotto, a confused housing policy for low-income people, and low-income people can't get the houses. And when you put somebody in the house because you want to win the next election, then after the body pay the first month rent, the body can't pay anymore, and then you come back and tell the entire society 60 to 70% of the tenants in the housing units cannot pay, and then you start putting them out and disgracing them on the street. Mr. Deputy Chairman, this is really the most heartbreaking thing that has happened since we went back. It is for me, because an innocent youngster who I'm told by the narrative he was going to get a roadie, never knew that his life would be gone in a couple seconds. The whole community empathized and felt the pain of that young man. And it's something that has reverberated across the entire landscape of Barbados itself. And I think that we have to give anything that is humanly possible. Anything. We cannot give back life, but what we can do is save others in the circumstances. No other person, look, in this year, we had, I think, about 2 other cases that I know about, persons who fell in wells. I know what I'm talking about. So we have to give people that comfort that the state understands that is their responsibility. Because those who are hiding, those who ignore those things because...
I remember you have 3 more minutes to win up.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair. Because it is not part of their values. They're not interested in those things. There are certain people in this country that you could go to jail for 1,000 years for stealing. My God, man was in jail for over 10 years on remand. You could understand a class of society that could have a man in a jail, no more than 1,000 people in prison in Barbados, and you have a system that kept a man in prison for 10 years. You got cooks up there, officers up there, magistrates, clerks, all kind of information technology programs that everybody else talking about, how we can keep the records. This is the most efficient new model that we have. You got a model that's so efficient that for 365 days for 10 years, you don't know that man in jail, that shimmy in jail. And then you hear people saying that there's a whole backlog that we now have to release them. But if you live in a society of that kind, then you know that people are inhumane. Intelligent people, not even backward people, people who boast about a university and lots of secondary schools and all these professional people. Nobody knew that a man was in jail. The members of the family didn't know that he was in jail. The lawyers, the magistrate, the records, nothing showed that a man was in jail. So it says something about us, this cold disconnect that exists among our people, that a man can fall in a well and the subject matter could be everything else. But this man fell in a well under circumstances where the state of the time, not necessarily this government, the state of the time neglected. And now all this week you can see pictures of hundreds of wells across various estates in Barbados, and now the minister has to find a way of redeeming himself, the parliamentary representative for the community, and the state itself. I personally believe, and thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I personally believe that all of us must give the assurance, not just to the parliamentary representative and the minister, that we'll give them their full support, but ultimately we have to let the people know that this is a party of conscience. Its history clearly demonstrates it's a party of conscience. Grant Adams took up the mantle in this country, not just as the first leader. And debating about the premier who think that is academic nonsense, or it's still a colony. And debating that, Grant Adams took it up first. All the records show poverty was staring us. We see it again, poverty staring us, and still staring us. And the objective, one of the major objectives of this party must remain, we have to eradicate poverty, what other achievements we might make, we have to eradicate poverty. Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Member for Jamaica Northwest.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to display my support towards this resolution, the vesting of Crown lands to the National Housing Corporation for housing development. Sir, 9 acres of land for housing development will certainly touch the lives of 79 families across Barbados. The member for St. Andrew and the member for St. John, I wish to congratulate both of you for executing such a good deed for the people of Barbados. A move like this, sir, is a move any caring government would do for the poor people who can't afford properties that cost over $300,000 or $400,000 across Barbados. A move like this, sir, any caring government would do to reduce the number of people on the waiting list at the National Housing Corporation. Sir, we as a government, we are not here to bring housing solutions similar to the one at Coverley. We are not here, sir, to sell government lands to restaurant owners like the one in Orange Hill. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are here to govern and to make a positive difference in the lives of the people who we were placed to represent.
Here.
Can you imagine, sir, a government collecting over $24 billion between 2008 and 2018, left $400 million in the Treasury, but left the National Housing Corporation bankrupt? Can you imagine, sir, the National Housing Corporation being bankrupt, but still has to struggle to pay engineers $1.2 million to carry out work for the corporation? Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, sir, the National Housing Corporation being bankrupt, but still continue to struggle to pay land surveyors over $495,000 to survey housing units across Barbados? The demand for housing is high, sir, and the demand is higher than the supply that the National Housing Corporation presently can provide. And poor people across this country, sir, are suffering because they are living under inhumane conditions. And I know of families, sir, who are presently renting houses. Some of these houses, sir, are in very, very poor condition. Some of these houses, sir, are rotten to the core, Mr. Speaker, sir. Some of these houses has outdoor toilet facilities, sir. And some of these houses have, sir, outdoor toilet facilities where these facilities are exposed to the elements, Mr. Speaker, sir. And, sir, sometimes when I traverse not only my constituency but Barbados and see the condition that some of these people are living in, Mr. Speaker, sir, sometimes it brings back memories when I was a boy growing up in Brighton, Black Rock, St. Michael, sir. I grew up in a three-bedroom wooden house, and it wasn't the best, sir. And I had to go out in the yard to use a pig toilet, just like some of these families that I have came in contact with, sir. And I even had days of utilizing a pipe in the yard, sir, as a shower in order to take baths. And it's very disheartening, sir, to see that we still have families who are still living in such circumstances in 2019. Sir, it's very hurtful to see that. And similarly, like the member, sir, for St. John, I wish to add to his comments, and I do look forward to a similar resolution that will benefit the good people of St. Michael Northwest. And I can honestly say that, sir, that we all want the best for ourselves. And I fully support this resolution because I want the best for the people I love and represent in the best constituency of St. Michael Northwest. And I surely hope, sir, that this housing development will benefit some of my constituents, especially the ones that wouldn't mind, living in the north under the present representative, sir. And I could honestly, say, sir, that the ministers of housing are doing excellent work managing that corporation. And I was elated when both ministers and officials from the National Housing Corporation took the time out, sir, to tour Dickens Farm and Rosemont, Ferniehearst, Golden Acre, to really listen, sir, to the concerns of the tenants, to identify the tenants, sir, that will receive their conveyances under this government, to offer advice, sir, to those tenants who are thinking about extending their units, sir, and most of all, to address the issues that are presently affecting the tenants in some of these housing units within my constituency, sir. And I will continue to say, sir, it really took a government like the Barbados Labour Party government to lead by example, Mr. Speaker, sir, and for the two ministers of housing to really govern that corporation after 10 years of corruption and mismanagement, sir. And I want to urge both ministers of housing to utilize the Crown lands situated in the constituency of St. Michael Northwest, Mr. Speaker, sir, for housing development whenever funding become available for such to materialize, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I want to conclude by saying, sir, that I look forward to the day when some of the families within my constituency can embrace a piece of this rock and have some place to call home under this present government and the leadership of the member for St. Michael Northeast. I oblige to you, sir.
Member for St. Andrew.
In wrapping up this debate, I would like to thank those members who have spoken on this resolution. Being in these chambers for some time and seeing resolutions before this House, matters before this House, being dealt with in a manner which would prevent members from going far and wide, I would like to compliment you for allowing the latitude that you have given to members, especially saying that this resolution really dealt, or rather really deals with the vesting of property in the National Housing Corporation for housing purposes. But I believe that it would probably have been a miracle, taking into consideration the circumstances of the last week, if members did not actually comment on that horrific incident which has shocked this nation during the past few days. I know that members could be somewhat passionate about their constituency, but I particularly like, in looking at the contribution of members, the simple statement by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South. The Democratic Labour Party government, the last government, tricked the people of this country. And they didn't just trick the people of this country. I think that some of us in these chambers seem to have forgotten that we have only been here for a few months. The problems that we have encountered during the time that we were here during the last few months, is really beyond one's imagination. Certainly in the Ministry of Housing, the type of problems that we have seen. Not only in terms of the corruptive element of it, but in terms of the inefficiency, the incompetence, the type of directives that have been given to officers, good officers within the ministry. And this is why I stop short of actually blaming directly any particular government agency. And I think it is wrong when officers who work tirelessly and are being then requested to make certain decisions against their own professional competence and professional reputation, when they could sit down and listen and hear people actually being critical of them and their institution. And certainly as Minister of Housing, however animated we might be in terms of our own constituency, I certainly will not condone any attacks on the institution that I have become fairly closely connected to. The National Housing Corporation is not the same National Housing Corporation that we left in 2008. It is not the same National Housing Corporation that I knew way back in 1994 when I was first Minister of Housing. A lot of things certainly certainly have changed, and changed drastically. You have situations where at the level of ministers, persons were put in houses and told not to pay rent. You have situations where at the level of ministers, persons were told to go in the open spaces, go and build, put your house there. They even told people exactly where to put their house. In terms of the problem now that confronts us with respect to that incident, you have situations. I was horrified when I went to did my tours, and I must say that I recognize, because of the problems which we heard about during the election campaign and by the candidates, I, together with the team from the ministry, because some of the same officers in the ministry, we had a series of meetings, and they were appalled by the directives which they were given by ministers during the past 10 years. The Prime Minister speaks of it as though it was the lost decade, and certainly it was. And it would have been impossible for us in that short space of time, within a year, to deal with the type of problems that we encountered on the 25th of May when we took office. Cognizant of the fact that there were problems, series of meetings, because it is not a wise thing simply to go in and say you're going to solve a problem without actually knowing exactly what you have to do. And I must say, I've been having a series of meetings, weekly meetings. We do tours of the various housing estates. Every single week, we do a different area. And I have seen, for the areas that we have visited, every single, I call it infraction, on the part of the last government. I believe that I have seen every single well in the Pine. Every single well in the Pine on those tours, because we stop, we take note. And the thing about it is that during our last tour, I don't know, I might have been a prophet, because I was trying as minister, and Minister Griffith could bear me out on this, to ensure that we finished those tours so that we would be able to get a report, an overall report. If I would say that there was any fault on our part, I record the chief as inspector at the National Housing Corporation, knowing the difficulty that they had. I mean, there were other problems too, which only apply to the Pine, but I wouldn't really go into details, because I wouldn't like to sort of put any blame on the culture in the Pine. I mean, that is another matter. That is a matter that one faces in any society, especially when there is neglect, because if there's neglect, if there is negligence, if there is corruption at the level of ministerial level, it will permeate throughout the system. But if there's one thing that I must say, I remember the chief bells inspector telling me, sort of reporting that, let us do the report on the Pine, and let us see what we can do with respect to the Pine before we move on anywhere else. And to his credit, had we done that, not that we would have been able to avoid the problem that happened, what transpired last week, but maybe we probably would have been close to solving, or rather to starting to fix some of the problems that we saw. And you know, dealing with these stores, dealing with the way certainly how I like to do things. The incident happened on Thursday. I mean, and we attended to the matter almost immediately. The minister Griffith was on the scene within seconds. I must say that the atmosphere was somewhat volatile, but that is to be expected in circumstances like this. A youngster has lost his life in circumstances where it should not have happened. But fault cannot be placed on the part of the Ministry of Housing or the National Housing Corporation. These were problems which were there in 2018, 2019, that were not there 10, 11 years ago, that were not there in 1994. Problems which mushroomed over a period of time. And one must also take into consideration the fact that because of the certain financial strictures, the National Housing Corporation was not in a position to do what it was supposed to do. I really don't want to go into the question of the financial position of the National Housing Corporation. As the parliamentary representative for St. Andrew, I know what the feeling of the member for St. Michael Southeast. St. Michael Southeast. I suffer her pain, and PAIN. But, I mean, we didn't have any deaths in Whitehill. We had no deaths in Whitehill. But the problems in Whitehill were graver than any other problem that I could think that faced any other ministry. But you see, it is one thing to say, well, this is only one well and we could have done it. But the type of the problems that the last government left, I think one must look at that, look at those problems. I mean, and no money to fix them. I mean, it is one thing to say, how can you go and fix one well in such a short space of time? A person dies and then you fix the well in a weekend. Why you didn't do it? But I mean, was that the only problem? You have to look at the problem that faced us on the 24th of May. South Coast sewage, millions and millions and millions of dollars. Remember for St. Michael East of Christchurch East? I mean, I have seen him come into cabinet, to cabinet almost every week. I mean, and there's a different problem almost every week. Millions of dollars being spent. I mean, and the problems we had with South Coast sewage. And you come this week and you think you have it, and then you have to go back. You spend about $2 or $3 million, and then to no avail. You got to come back and go back again. I mean, the problems with public transport. Serious problems. I think the Minister of Transport, I don't know those of you who knew Minister of Transport at the time of elections, but he's lost about 100 pounds since then. I mean, you look at him. You look at him and you will see. You see the Minister of Michael East, the question of the garbage trucks. All of these are matters that could have been dealt with if the last administration had done what it was supposed to do. So we cannot come here, I know how we would feel about these matters. I know how I feel about Whitehill. I know how I feel like Whitehill. An entire community has been dislocated. And the fact remains that as I speak, even to the bottom of Whitehill, I mean, that area might disintegrate at any particular point in time. People can't leave their homes to go anywhere. I know the suffering of those people in Whitehill. People having to climb up little steps in order to go and catch a bus. You leave home at 12 o'clock in order to get somewhere at 6 o'clock. But nobody has died. Nobody has died. Maybe if somebody had died, we would have had the road fixed because the priority would have shifted. It is a question of your priorities. The priorities would have shifted. And in the case of the bell, it is not that was not a priority. It is that you can't have a plan to deal with one well. You have a plan to deal with an entire area. And then there are certain problems in certain things, certain matters pertaining to the housing estates. I mean, I touched on it with respect to what people were told. People building construction, massive constructions, 2-story buildings on wells. 2-story buildings on wells. I saw some things in the Pine that I never, ever thought was possible. It was something out of a movie. People come and complain to you, thought they were. I mean, when people came and complained to me, I mean, because if you build your house, a 2-story house on a well, and then they start affecting the neighbor next door, obviously they would have to complain, and the type of complaints coming out of the Pine by persons who were affected